When humans get angry, the universe trembles. The Crone raiding fleet charged their weapons and aimed them at Earth. They were unaware that their presence had been detected long before their arrival. Below, on the pale blue planet, the sleeping giant had awakened, rallied, and now lay in wait, angry and prepared. The bridge of the Crone flagship, Silent Talon, buzzed with activity as Commander Six studied the tactical display. Earth and its moon hovered before him. Despite their inferior technology by galactic standards, taking the planet wouldn't be easy. Crone intelligence had grossly underestimated human resistance, and now, hundreds of stealth warships and orbital defense platforms surrounded Earth and Luna. Sex's mandibles clicked in irritation. No matter, the Crone fleet outnumbered and outgunned the humans 3-1, and his soldiers were bred for conquest, stronger, faster, and more savage than these pink apes could ever hope to match in close quarters combat. The order to advance was given. Plasma cannons charged ready. At 20,000 kilometers out, the Crone fleet slowed and unfurled into attack formation. Yet something seemed amiss. The human warships had not moved from their positions guarding Earth and the moon. They showed no sign of aggression or fear. Were they immobilized by terror in the face of the massive Crone force? Perhaps they hoped to beg for mercy. No, Six thought uneasily. Human communication had made it clear surrender was not an option. They were planning something. But what? A trap? Some new secret superweapon? Alarm klaxons blared. Commander, multiple FTL signatures detected, shouted his sensor officer. Sykes looked at his display in confusion and horror as hundreds more human vessels suddenly blinked into existence on all sides, totally encircling the Crone. The ships were sleek and bristling with gun ports, but they had not been there a moment before. A chilling realization dawned on Six. The humans had mastered faster-than-light teleportation technology, and now the Crone fleet was cut off from escape and surrounded. The hunter had become the prey. All ships, ready main batteries. Target the flagship and fire on my command, came the human admiral's orders over the communication channel. Zix looked on helplessly as thousands of rail guns and plasma batteries swiveled to point directly at the heart of his fleet. Perhaps we should not have enraged the humans after all. Axix thought grimly as the human ships unleashed hell upon them. And so began the Crone's brutal introduction to the human concept called payback. The opening salvo from the human fleet tore through the unprepared Crone ships like tissue paper, destroying dozens of cruisers and frigates instantly. Klaxons wailed on the Silent Talon as explosions cascaded across the flagship's hull from direct railgun hits. Axix gripped his command chair as the bridge pitched and tossed under the withering bombardment. Return fire, he bellowed. Target their flagship and largest vessels. First Crone plasma cannons and torpedoes streaked towards the massed human fleet, only to be intercepted by defensive laser grids and railgun point defense systems. Only a few scattered shots connected, melting armor plating but failing to penetrate the human heavy shielding. It soon became clear the Crone were totally outmatched. Zykes watched in dismay as one Crone heavy cruiser after another blinked out of existence on his tactical display, shredded by the humans' overwhelming firepower. How had the humans built so many advanced warships right under the Crone's snouts? Their last intelligence reports showed the humans to be fractured and technologically inferior, yet they had somehow unlocked technologies thought to be decades away, even for the powerful Crone scientific caste. The Silent Talon shuddered again as a barrage of missiles detonated against its shields. Cracks spider-webbed across the bridge viewport. They couldn't take much more of this pounding. All ships, focus fire on the human flagship, ordered Axix desperately. We must. His words were cut off as a rail gun slug punched straight through the bridge hull. Atmosphere vented in a split second, sucking Zex and his bridge crew out into the frozen void. The magnetic rounds continued, punching through the cruiser's interior compartments, bursting fuel lines and munitions magazines as the Silent Talon erupted into a series of fiery detonations. On the human flagship Valiant, Admiral Harris watched grimly as escape pods and Crone pods streamed away from the dying Crone ships. Less than 5 minutes into the battle, and the alien fleet was already coming apart at the seams. This is almost too easy, he thought. Shall we pursue and finish them off? Admiral Azexo asked. Negative. Let them run back to Croya with their tails between their legs, Harris replied. Our message today was clear: humanity will not tolerate unprovoked attacks on our worlds. As the last smoldering Crone wrecks faded off his display, Harris opened a channel to Earth. Mission accomplished, he reported. The incursion has been repelled. Cheers erupted across all channels from the lunar bases and defense platforms on Earth below. Humanity celebrated their victory and marveled at the quantum leap in their technological prowess. The Crone had poked a sleeping dragon and would not soon forget the consequences. After their crushing victory over the Crone incursion, A mood of triumph and celebration swept across human-controlled space. News of the battle spread like wildfire, and billions watched rebroadcasts of the Crone fleet being ripped to shreds. Humanity had faced its first true interstellar trial and passed with flying colors. However, in the corridors of power, there was a somber reckoning of the new reality humanity found itself in. They were no longer isolated and technologically inferior. Unlocking the quantum wormhole drive had catapulted them overnight into the big leagues, but it also painted a target on their heads. Humanity needed to expand its defenses, and quickly. Construction soon commenced on more orbital shipyards, defensive platforms, and rapid manufacturing centers on Mars and the Moon. A new wave of wormhole-capable warships began rolling off the assembly lines, bristling with exotic metals and advanced weapon systems. Admiral Harris stood looking out the viewport of the new Orion-class dreadnought, Dominion, one of the first of its kind. At 15 kilometers long, it boasted enough firepower to slag a small moon. He was to take command of the first long-range battle group, tasked with patrolling and securing human colonies out to 50 light-years from Earth. "Admiral, we've received an update from Croya," reported his XO, Commander Lewis. "The aliens have increased their military presence around the storm zone bordering our space. Several battle fleets are moving to reinforce their outposts." Harris nodded grimly. The vast interstellar nebula storm known as the Tempest Cloud marked the current border between human and Crone space. It had long been deemed impassable until the advent of the quantum drives. Skirmishes seemed inevitable. "They're testing our resolve," Harris replied, probing to see if we've overextended ourselves after our recent technology leap. "Have they made any aggressive moves?" "Not yet. Their ships have stayed on their side of the storm zone. No border violations," Lewis confirmed. "Then neither will we make the first move or show any weakness," said Harris. "Dispatch a carrier group and 2 destroyer squadrons to patrol our side of the border. Priority mission is reconnaissance and intelligence gathering. Under no circumstances are they to cross the storm zone or take offensive action. Is that clear?" "Yes, sir," Lewis replied, heading off to relay the orders. Despite his even tone, Harris felt the weight of humanity's future resting on his shoulders. Millions of lives now depended on the long-range battle groups and orbital defenses to keep their colonies safe. It was a grave responsibility, but one he bore willingly. The Crone may have numbers and experience, but humanity had innovation, grit, and righteous anger on their side. Harris silently vowed the Crone would come to rue the day they'd cross swords with mankind. The next weeks were tense, but no clashes occurred as both sides continued to build up forces on the border. Harris was uneasy with the Crone's unusual restraint. Were they plotting something? The answer came during a high-level briefing at Fleet Command. "We've detected concentrated ship movements within one of the larger Crone colonies bordering the storm zone," reported the intelligence officer. "Long-range imaging shows them assembling what looks like an invasion fleet near the planet's moon. Over 200 capital ships so far, and more arriving daily." Murmurs of alarm rippled through the briefing room. A hologram of the moon flickered to life, showing mile-long Crone troop carriers and bristling battle cruisers gathered menacingly in orbit. "That moon houses one of their major fleet academies and rallying points," rumbled Admiral Envy. "It appears they are preparing for a major offensive, but amassing such a force will leave their central colonies weakened and exposed," said Admiral Locke, confusion evident on her face. "They'd be incredibly vulnerable to counterattack." Harris nodded slowly as he studied the augmented reality display of the Crone fleet, a plan crystallizing in his mind. "Not if they mean to strike quick and hard at our core worlds before we have time to respond," he replied. The implications sank in among the gathered brass and government officials. Croya was gambling everything on one knockout blow deep into human space. "How the hell do they plan to actually reach our central colonies so quickly?" said Envy. "Even with quantum drives, no ship can cross the storm zone without being ripped apart." "The Orion sensor logs from the first battle may have the answer," said Harris gravely. "Our telemetry recorded the Crone ships using focused graviton beams just before going FTL. I believe they've weaponized their quantum drives into some kind of wormhole stabilizer." The implications were dire. With such technology, the Crone could tunnel directly through the heart of the storm zone unimpeded and emerge right on humanity's doorstep. The Admiral's grim expressions reflected Harris's own dread, but he also saw an opportunity in the enemy's brazen plan. "By committing their main force in one sector, they've left their core worlds exposed," he announced. "We now have a chance to deliver a decisive counterblow." Pulling up a map of Crone space, Harris highlighted several inner colonies and industrial hubs. "While the door is open, I propose we assemble 2 rapid strike forces here," and here Harris continued. "We will quantum jump into these systems to attack infrastructure and troop production centers. He zoomed in on images of sprawling shipyards. Bring these facilities down and we cut the head off the Crone war machine. Their invasion fleet will wither on the vine without reinforcements. Murmurs of approval rippled through the assembled brass. The Orion's long-range battle group can spearhead the Soul Strike Force, suggested Nav. Harris nodded. We will marshal our new Ares cruisers as well. I want them ready to depart in 1 week. He stood, confidence and controlled fury in his voice. It's time we took the fight to the Crone doorstep for a change. The officers saluted and set about their tasks with determination. Harris allowed himself a wolfish smile. The Crone had no idea the sleeping giant they'd awoken. Now humanity would build the heaviest hammer in the galaxy, then come crush the Crone colonists under its weight. The next 7 days saw Fleet Command transformed into a hive of activity. The looming threat of invasion mobilized humanity into action. Countless preparations needed organizing, contingencies ironing out, logistics secured, forces assembled, and cries for war dampened. Admiral Harris strode through the complex, his steely gaze betraying none of the apprehension roiling inside him. The burden of leadership weighed heavy, but he would not falter. Harris made his way to the intelligence briefing room, where the latest reports on Crone fleet movements were being compiled and analyzed. Several officers hunched over displays lining the circular room as streams of data flowed in from stealth probes shadowing the enemy armada massing near the storm zone. Harris stopped behind a young lieutenant studying a screen showing thousands of Crone landing craft emerging from the moon's gaping dock bays. What's our latest count on their invasion force? Harris asked. The lieutenant straightened. Over 700 capital warships now, sir. Our probots have identified several Empyrean-class troop carriers capable of transporting 5 million ground soldiers apiece. They also appear to be fueling a dozen Ranker-class cruiser carriers. Those could hold 100,000 drones and armored vehicles each. Harris's jaw tightened. Such a force could easily steamroll any one of humanity's colonies. And the wormhole stabilizers. Can we confirm their weaponization? Yes, sir, the lieutenant replied. Our scans show several of the largest warships outfitted with specialized graviton beam arrays near their FTL drives. They're definitely preparing to puncture directly through the storm zone. How long until they are fully assembled and deployment ready? The lieutenant shuffled some reports. At the current pace of buildup, our analysts estimate the Crones will be ready to launch their offensive in approximately 2 weeks. 2 weeks? Then the fire would rain down upon humanity's frontier worlds. But Harris had a plan to turn the tide dramatically in their favor. Keep me informed of any changes. We'll be ready with a little surprise welcome when they come knocking. Harris turned sharply and exited the room, his crisp uniform seeming to cut through the air. There was no time to waste. His next stop was Docking Bay 12, where the Orion was prepped and supplied for its upcoming deep strike mission. Harris watched approvingly as swarms of engineering bots scurried over the massive warship's hull, patching melted armor, retrofitting new weapon systems, and topping up its antimatter fuel stores in preparation. Nearby, the cruiser Ares and her task force were undergoing similar upgrades. When the Orion first launched a year prior, it was a marvel of human engineering and ingenuity, the most powerful vessel Earth had ever constructed. Yet now, fresh out of the shipyards, came improved classes like the Ares that made the Orion look almost dated by comparison. Humanity was advancing at a breakneck pace. The Crones would not know what hit them. Inside Docking Bay 15, it was controlled chaos as the second strike force made ready. Harris thought the swarming activity resembled an anthill preparing for war. Frigates and corvettes were lined up by the dozen while Marines and mechs practiced urban combat maneuvers. This strike force would hit an industrial hub nearer to the storm zone as a distraction. Ten Hut barked the strike captain, snapping to attention as Harris approached. At ease, Captain Harris replied. Your teams know this is strictly a surgical strike on production facilities. In and out with minimal delays, the captain pounded a fist to her chest. We'll strike hard and fade like ghosts. The Crone will know what hit him. Harris nodded, then made his way to mission control. After checking in with various ship captains and squadron leaders, he was confident they were as ready as they could be. Now came the hardest part, waiting. Over the next few days, he resisted micromanaging and forced patience, difficult as it was. He kept up morale and spirits as tension mounted. Finally, the day came. Assembled fleet commanders stood around the auditorium, displaying their ships, regrouping at the fringes of the storm zone like horses at the starting gate. The crews were ready. This was it. Harris activated the room's view screen, which displayed a tactical map of nearby Crone-controlled space. On the other side, his eyes narrowed as he spotted a familiar icy orb, the fleet rallying moon from which Croya would soon launch its invasion. The enemy war machine lumbers to life, Harris announced, but they have left their worlds unguarded in their haste. Now we strike them at their heart. The commanders listened intently around him. We will attack in 2 coordinated groups. Task Force Rs will strike here at Krone industrial and economic centers. Task Force Hellstorm will strike military production near the moon, anchoring their invasion fleet. Harris zoomed in on each target zone. If we succeed, the enemy offensive will collapse before it can gain momentum. Kroya will face turmoil at home and possible rebellion in its colonies. He straightened to address the silent crews. You know the plan. You have your targets. Bring hell down upon them, then withdraw and wait for Kroya's response. This campaign unfolds one battle at a time. The steely commanders slammed fists against chests in salute. Now prepare for quantum jump on my signal, Harris ordered. Today we seize the initiative for Earth. An echoing cry of "for Earth" resounded as the link terminated. Squaring his shoulders, Harris opened the wormhole channel. All ships, jump space seemed to twist and distort around the 2 strike forces as quantum wormholes opened. They appeared to stretch and snap like elastic before vanishing from sight in an instant. To Krone observers, they simply blinked out of existence. Moments later, panicked alarm klaxons rang out across multiple Krone colonies as the human strike forces decanted back into real space light years behind enemy lines. Harris watched intently from mission control as Operation Hammer commenced with surgical precision. Video streamed back from drones accompanying the strike forces as the Krone industrial centers were suddenly swarmed by human warships appearing out of nowhere. Barrage after barrage of railgun slugs and plasma fire streaked down moments later, reducing factories and shipyards to rubble. Fires raged above the planet's atmosphere. Hellstorm Task Force was assigned to hit military production and staging grounds on Kroya's frozen moon. Dropships swooped down, deploying Marines and mechanized divisions across the airless surface. Brief but savage firefights erupted outside bunkers and vehicle depots as the Krone rallied to meet the unexpected threat. But the humans' objective was terror through the destruction of assets, not occupation. Harris watched impassively as Ares cruisers in orbit unleashed their devastating firepower on the moon's sprawling military facilities. Laser ports and railgun batteries turned acres of armor and aircraft into molten scrap. Dark satisfaction crept into Harris's normally stony demeanor. The enemy's preparations were burning before him. Both strike forces were in and out within minutes, fading away to their rally points as suddenly as they'd arrived. The surgical strikes had been swift, coordinated, and devastating. Early reports confirmed the attacks had crippled Kroya's production capacity by over 60%. Their invasion timetable would be set back by months at least. Most importantly, humanity had sent a clear message: strike at us, and we will retaliate with overwhelming force. The sleeping giant had awoken. In the auditorium, cheers erupted from the commanders as news came in from the twin strikes. Handshakes and congratulations were shared all around. They'd landed a crippling blow with no casualties. Champagne stood at the ready for Harris and his staff, but the Admiral's expression remained stony. This was just the opening salvo in what would likely be a long conflict. Humanity would need to stay adaptive, clever, and merciless if it hoped to guarantee its place among the stars. The Krone fleet struggled to regroup after the devastating opening attack from the humans. Their ships were in ruins, venting atmosphere and bodies into the cold void of space. Commander 6 gripped his command console in frustration as warning sirens blared across the ravaged bridge of the Silent Talon. "Damage report," he shouted, mandibles clicking rapidly in distress. His bridge officers worked their controls, assessing the situation. Primary power offline, multiple hull breaches across decks 12 through 20, casualties mounting in the aft sections, reported his first officer. "Our shields are depleted, and weapon systems are down across the board." Ezek slammed a clawed fist into his armrest. This battle was supposed to be their glorious conquest over the humans, and now his fleet was being ripped to shreds within minutes. But Krones did not accept defeat lightly. "Seal off affected decks and get emergency power restored," now Axix bellowed. "Bring us about and prepare to return fire on the human flagship." On the Valiant, Admiral Harris studied his tactical display as the Krones struggled to regroup. The tight, coordinated attack formations the aliens had arrived in were now disintegrating into a disordered rabble as ships vented atmosphere and spun out of control. Yet his experienced eyes noticed the larger warships were turning ponderously to face the human fleet again, their plasma weapon banks aglow with building fury. "Sir," the enemy flagship and several heavy cruisers looked to be attempting to return fire, called out his weapons officer. "Let them," Harris replied calmly. "Our attack was merely the first volley. Keep up the barrage. All batteries, fire at will, turn their precious fleet into floating debris." The Valiant shuddered slightly as massive plasma cannons discharged, sending bolts of superheated matter streaking towards the Crone ships. All around the human fleet, thousands of additional railgun slugs, missiles, and particle beams leapt forth to join the fray. In the silence of space, the titanic discharge of energy was strangely beautiful, like ghostly neon tendrils linking the two armadas. Then they made contact, and the Crone ships erupted into horrendous explosions. No eye or camera could fully capture the scene. The assembled firepower of the human fleet was beyond anything the aliens had conceived of in their arrogance. Harris watched with detached focus as the tactical display updated in real time. The Crone fleet icons blinked, turned red, then disappeared as the ships were blown apart. Return fire from the aliens was sporadic and ineffective, easily absorbed by the powerful shields of the human fleet. It was a completely one-sided slaughter. Minutes dragged into hours. Occasionally a damaged Crone cruiser or frigate would attempt to go FTL and retreat, only to be picked off by human interdiction ships. The entire area was locked down under fields of quantum disruption, preventing any possibility of escape. There would be no survivors. Long into the artificial night cycle, the last few Crone signatures wavered and went dark, signifying the total annihilation of the would-be invading armada. Nearly 1,000 alien vessels were cracked open and emptied of their crew into the freezing vacuum of space. Harris rubbed his eyes, the weight of so many lives lost settling heavily on his shoulders, despite the necessity of it. "Admiral, all Crone ships accounted for and confirmed destroyed," reported his XO somberly. "We are detecting multiple escape pods as well." Orders Harris considered for a long moment. "Activate recovery drones to board the pods and take prisoners for interrogation," he finally said. "No further offensive action is authorized beyond this point." The bridge crew let out a collective sigh of relief. The battle was over, and Earth was safe. They had won the day through overwhelming force and advanced technology, but the victory felt hollow to Harris. So many dead, and the Crone would certainly be back for revenge after today's crushing defeat. This was far from over. As the human fleet moved to secure the field of wreckage, Harris opened a channel back to fleet comm on Earth. He straightened in his uniform and steadied his voice before speaking. "Mission accomplished. The incursion has been repelled, but this was only the first skirmish. Croya will return again with larger forces, so we must marshal our resources and expand production of defenses immediately." The transmission carried on into the void as humanity celebrated its first victory but prepared for the long interstellar war still to come. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. For every comment that says, we will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.